Teacher Talking Sports, what does, what do, how we live. And let's continue the series I've been doing, where I name who I believe are the four best players in each decade MLB history, starting with the 2010s, going backwards. Today is the 1920s. So let's take a look at the four guys I chose. We'll get into more detail on why they were chosen later in the video. But anyhow, in alphabetical order by last name, we have Harry Heilmann, Rogers Hornsby, Babe Ruth, and Dazzy Vance. So, some honorable mentions. I really thought I was going to put Pete Alexander on as the starting pitcher. Not that I have to have one. Some I've had more than one, some zero. But I went with Vance more on that a little bit. But other honorable mentions, Frankie Frisch, Goose Goslin, George Sisler, and Lou Gehrig, who made my 1930s and was excellent at the end of the 1920s, but just wasn't around long enough in the decade. But yes, let's take a look at the four guys I did end up choosing, again, alphabetical order by last name, starting with Harry Heilmann. So Heilmann played with the Detroit Tigers for the whole decade, mostly playing in right field. For his time in the decade, Heilmann batted .364 with a .991 OPS, 156 OPS plus, 142 homers, 1,131 RBIs, 962 runs scored, 397 doubles, 101 triples, 1,924 hits. He didn't win MVP, but had finishes of 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 9th, 12th, and 15th in MVP voting. Heilmann won 4 batting crowns in the decade, including a season where he batted .403 in 1923, batted at least .309 in every season, had 5 seasons with over a 1,000 OPS, led the league with 134 RBIs in 1925. That was one of 8 seasons with over 100 RBIs. He had 4 seasons with over 100 runs. 21 homers was his high. 8 of the 10, well, actually every season he had at least 9 homers. Led the league with 45 doubles in 1924. That was one of 7 seasons, with at least 40 doubles. Had 50 in 1927. Led the league with 237 hits in 1921. That was one of 4 seasons where he had over 200 hits. Harry Heilmann, kind of one of the forgotten old-time greats, but in the end, I decided to include him on my 1920s Mount Rushmore. Next, arguably the greatest second baseman of all time, that being Rogers Hornsby. So Hornsby played with the St. Louis Browns for the first 7 seasons of the decade, then 1 season with the New York Giants, 1 with the Boston Braves, and 1929 with the Chicago Cubs. So in the decade, Hornsby batted .382 with a 1,096 OPS, 188 OPS plus, 250 homers, 1,153 RBIs, 1,195 runs scored, 405 doubles, 115 triples, 2,085 hits. So Hornsby won 2 MVPs in the decade, 1925 with the Browns, the St. Louis Cardinals. I don't know why I said the Browns, but anyhow, St. Louis Cardinals, 1925 MVP, and then 1929 won an MVP with the Chicago Cubs. He won 7 batting titles in the decade, including a 1924 season. He batted .424. One of 3 seasons he batted over 400. In the decade, he had 8 seasons with over a 1,000 OPS, even had a season with over a 500 on base percentage. Twice led the league in homers, 42 in 1922. Twice had 39 homers. Led the league in RBIs 4 times, 5 seasons with triple-digit RBIs, 5 times led in runs. He had 6 seasons of at least triple-digit runs scored. Led the league in hits 4 times. That was 4 of 7 seasons he had more than 200 hits. Led the league in doubles 4 times. Those were 4 of 7 seasons he had more than 40 doubles. Also, each of his first 6 seasons had triple digits in double digits in triples. Rogers Hornsby, again, one of the all-time greats at second baseman, an incredible hitter throughout the 1920s, a member of the 1926 Cardinals team that went on to win the World Series. Rogers Hornsby is the second member of my 1920s Mount Rushmore. Next, let's go with the great Bambino, that being Babe Ruth. So Ruth played the entire decade with the New York Yankees, and boy was he incredible. For the decade, Ruth batted .355 with a 1,228 OPS, a 216 OPS plus, 467 homers, 1,338 RBIs, 1,365 runs scored, 1,240 walks, nearly a 500 on base percentage, 488. So Ruth was named the MVP in 1923, won a batting title in 1924, but besides 1925, batted over 300 every season. Led the league in on-base percentage 6 times, slugging percentage 9 times, OPS 9 times. 1920, he had an OPS of 1,379, ridiculous. Ruth led the league in homers 8 times, including a then record 60 in 1927. One of 4 seasons he hit more than 50. Led the league in RBIs 4 times. 8 seasons with triple-digit RBIs, led the league in runs scored 7 times, had 8 seasons of triple-digit runs. Babe Ruth also led the league in walks 7 times, including 170 walks in 152 games in 1923. Of course, the Yankees were an excellent team throughout that era, and he won 3 World Series with the team in 1923, 1927, and 1928. All in all, the Yankees made 6 World Series in his time, and he had 13 homers in those 6 World Series in the decade. According to Baseball Reference, he led the league in WAR 8 times in the decade. I mean, probably the most obvious choice of any decade. Babe Ruth, the third member of the 1920s Mount Rushmore, and the toughest guy to choose, again, between Vance and Alexander, I went with Dazzy Vance, even though he didn't pitch the first 2 seasons of the decade, but in his 8 seasons, all with the Brooklyn Robins, which is what they were known as prior to being known as the Brooklyn Dodgers. Vance went 147-90 with a 3.10 ERA, 172 complete games in his 244 starts, 22 shutouts, 1,464 strikeouts. So Vance won the MVP in 1924. As I've mentioned, this is prior to the Cy Young being handed out. Also had MVP finishes of 5th and 11th. I mean, this was an era where strikeout numbers weren't high, but Vance definitely kind of was like the, Nolan Ryan or Randy Johnson of his era. He led the league in strikeouts. Each of the first 7 seasons he pitched in the 1920s, so 1922 to 1928. He also led the league in wins 2 seasons, 28 in 1924, 22 in 1925, 2 of 3 seasons where he had at least 20 wins, led the league in ERA twice, had 3 seasons with under a 3 ERA, led the league in complete games twice, shutouts 3 times, according to Baseball Reference, led the league in WAR 3 times, including 2 seasons with over a 10 WAR. Dazzy Vance, kind of like Heilman, not one of the more talked about guys from the more early days of MLB, but definitely had a great career, and I decided to include him in the 1920s Mount Rushmore. But let me know in the comments, do you agree? Do you disagree? This was definitely a challenging one. I mean, Hornsby and Ruth, of course, were no-brainers. The other 2 were tougher to choose, but I went Heilman and Dazzy Vance. Stay tuned for tomorrow. I'll be doing the 1910s. Anyhow, don't forget to subscribe. Tell a friend, tell a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Like the video, share the video, hit the bell for notifications. I'm out.